Well, there you can see in the centre of the screen the French Foreign Minister Laurent Fabius. There's the American Secretary of State John Kerry. And yes, you've guessed it, we're still here in Normandy, continuing our live coverage of the D-Day commemorations, the 70th anniversary this year. And the world leaders have had their rather nice lunch in a nearby chateau, and they're now arriving for the main event of the day, the official international celebrations, which are being held on the beach here under some enormous temporary structures erected by the French, doing things in style for this 70th anniversary. Probably the last significant anniversary of the D-Day landings, at which many veterans will be able to take part. There's the former French President Nicolas Sarkozy arriving.
Heureux de vous voir. Merci, monsieur. Ah, heureux de vous voir. Merci, je vais vous escorter jusqu'à votre place. Vous êtes dans le protocole maintenant?
Non, coordinateur, on m'a mis coordinateur donc, de l'événement Normandie. On va passer par l'extérieur.
Le président. Je sais, mais je disais bonjour. Bonjour.
Ça cassé?
Nice to meet you, sir. Bonjour. Bonjour.
Now, in a nice little familiar touch, the French have decided that each head of state, as they arrive and is presented to the crowd, will be greeted by a child from the region. And the child will hold hands with the world leader as they make their way to the assembled ranks of veterans with whom they'll be presented. It's a significant gesture that this event that looks back to the past is also very concerned with the present. The past generation holding hands with the new generation walking in the footsteps of the past generation, hopefully treading in a peaceful world. And of course, although world leaders have gathered here to remember the past, there is some very pressing present business to attend to. And we've heard that in the last hour or so, French President François Mitterrand was able to broker a first face-to-face meeting between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukraine's new President-elect Poroshenko. We haven't heard any details of what has emerged from that reportedly brief face-to-face meeting between the two men, whose countries are currently locked in dispute. We can only hope that the two men meeting together were able to clear the air somewhat. Of course, an informal meeting, which doesn't in itself mean anything, but the fact that it took place at all marks a new step in the Ukrainian crisis. Presidents Putin and Poroshenko can no longer say they have nothing to do with each other. And hopefully a line of contact, a channel of communication has been set up. And there we can see the arrival of François Hollande and Barack Obama, the host and the lead guest arriving. And once they've taken their positions, I believe the international ceremony will be able to commence. Now, if you weren't able to follow our coverage earlier today, I can tell you that it began at 9 a.m. this morning with a slightly different celebration, a slightly different ceremony where no military uniforms at all were visible. And it was a ceremony led by President François Hollande, a ceremony led by the French for the French, to commemorate the sacrifice made by the Normandy civilians during the invasion, 20,000 of whom died, mostly under Allied bombs and shells, as the Allies bombarded Germany's Atlantic Wall into submission before landing their forces. And Hollande inaugurated an impressive sculpture, mural, commemorating the losses in Normandy and in the town of Caen in particular, which was almost three-quarters totally destroyed. So that was the national commemoration at 9 o'clock this morning. At something like 10:30 this morning, the focus of events changed just down the coast to Colville-sur-Mer, overlooking Omaha Beach, which was so expensive in American lives in 1944, where the Americans fought the bloodiest fighting of the invasion itself. And at the American ceremony, Barack Obama was joined by François Hollande, who flew in from Caen in his helicopter to pay his respects to the sacrifice the Americans made, in particular, on the 6th of June 1944. At the same time, the British were holding their commemoration at their British War ceremony. And then after that, we had the official lunch at the Château de Bénouville in Calvados. And we're now coming out of that official lunch, which began about 2 hours ago, with the final world leaders arriving from the dining room and taking their places. And the international ceremony will, as I say, be shortly starting. So that's it so far for this day. You haven't missed a great deal if you haven't been with us, but stay with us, and you won't miss a thing of what is to come.
la bise. Ouf. Et le président Carrère. Pour qu'il le voit. Barbara, c'est bien. Voilà. On va voir Jean-Louis. Si tu vois pas Jean-Louis, ça va pas. Non, on va pas, Paul. Non.
Well, things are running a little late. We'd been told the international ceremony was due to start about 11 minutes ago, and as you can see, people are still taking their seats after the official luncheon. So I think we're going to leave them for a while to take their seats and sort themselves out, and we'll be back again as soon as the international ceremony begins. We're now returning to our regular news broadcasting, but we'll be back in Normandy very soon.
He's been dubbed the French GI, for it was in American uniform that 94-year-old Bernard d'Argolle from Paris took part in the Allied invasion of Normandy. When war broke out, he was in New York on an internship at a sewing machine factory. The young man, whose family was Jewish, stayed in the US, where he gained citizenship and signed up for the army, specializing in military intelligence. I left France at the age of 18 as a young teenager. I returned at 24, 6 years later, with an American uniform and the rank of staff sergeant. With the possibility of seeing my family and friends again. It was an emotional time that's difficult to describe. Part of the dwindling band of elderly veterans who've returned to the beaches, Bernard is keen to distinguish fact from Hollywood fiction when it comes to D-Day. As I landed at about 100 meters from the shore, I'd never seen such a beautiful beach. And then for the last 100 meters, I was in the middle of a bombardment. Gut-wrenching bombing that I'd never experienced before. And not German bombing, but Allied bombing, with the sole aim of allowing us to gain a safe foothold in France. But this bombing also killed French civilians and destroyed French homes.
Démolit des maisons françaises, des logements.
70 years on, thoughts are also with the military men who left their lives behind, as our correspondent reports. Only American soldiers who fell during World War II lie in this cemetery at Colleville-sur-Mer. Victims of the D-Day landings represent only 10% of the graves. It's an extremely moving place, the most visited site of all the monuments linked to the Normandy landings.
The crisis in Ukraine has been high on the international agenda. British Prime Minister David Cameron has held talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Paris. Cameron said he gave Putin a very clear and firm set of messages.
But the status quo, the situation today, is not acceptable and it needs to change. We need the Russians to properly recognise and work with this new president. We need de-escalation. We need to stop arms and people crossing the border. We need action on these fronts.
Meanwhile, German Chancellor Angela Merkel and the Ukrainian President-elect Petro Poroshenko met together in Berlin ahead of Poroshenko's inauguration on Saturday. The opportunities which will open up after the inauguration of the new Ukrainian president and the opportunities of the new peace program in the east of Ukraine must be fully grasped, Poroshenko said. At the G7 meeting in Brussels, leaders said they were ready to impose further sanctions on Russia over Ukraine. Russia was excluded for the first time in 16 years, turning what was supposed to be the G8 into the G7.
TV stations in Hungary have gone off air for 15 minutes in protest at a proposed bill which would tax advertising revenue up to 40%. Over 60 private media companies cut their services. Newspapers planned blank front pages. Websites stopped working. Radio stations fell silent. Hungary's media companies are furious over the proposed advertising tax. Media insiders say it would cripple the industry and tighten the government's hold on the press. The tax will be the latest in a series of so-called special levies passed by Prime Minister Viktor Orban's government. According to one MP, under the bill, even companies like Facebook and Google could be taxed.
In Canada, a man suspected of killing 3 police officers and wounding 2 others has been detained. Canadian authorities said Justin Bourque, photographed here, was arrested in Moncton, New Brunswick on Friday, bringing to an end a massive manhunt which had ran into a second night. Schools and government offices were closed and residents were told to stay indoors as hundreds of police cordoned off a large area of the eastern Canadian city of about 70,000. Wednesday's shooting was one of the worst of its kind in Canada, where gun laws are stricter than in the US and deadly attacks on police are rare. Haitians have taken to the streets of Port-au-Prince calling for the resignation of President Michel Martelly and fresh elections amid growing political anger in the Caribbean nation. An estimated 5,000 people marched through the centre of the capital to protest against what they claim is a lack of action by authorities to alleviate hunger and tackle a cholera epidemic. Despite starting off peacefully, the protest quickly escalated, with riot police firing tear gas to disperse the crowd as protesters burned tyres and blocked streets. Anti-government protests in Haiti have become increasingly common in recent months as discontent grows over perceived government corruption and a lack of change in the impoverished country since a catastrophic earthquake in 2010. President Martelly, who is midway through a 6-year term, has accused his opponents of fomenting instability, discouraging foreign investment and blocking legislation that would help the country.
Discover a pioneering Forex investment platform from the best FX broker of 2013. FX Pro. Trade Forex like a pro. A great country awakens and offers a fertile environment for investment in an attractive and secure business climate in compliance with international standards and the OHADA. One-stop shop allowing a company to be created in just 3 days. Reduced corporation tax. New mining code as well as customs, investment and anti-corruption laws in force. Promising economy. Surging growth rate. 80 million hectares of arable land for food production. 150,000 kilometers of roads and 12 million housing units under construction. Fiber optic connections. An emerging dynamic middle class. Fundamental reforms in place. Modern, booming country offering exceptional opportunities for investment. This is the new Congo. The time to invest in the Democratic Republic of Congo is now.
Le drapeau du régiment de fusiliers marins a été remis en 1915 par le président de la République, M. Raymond Poincaré, à la brigade de fusiliers marins de l'amiral Renard, après son combat héroïque lors de la bataille de Dixmude. Ce drapeau est le premier de l'histoire à avoir été attribué à une unité de la Marine nationale. Il est aujourd'hui le troisième drapeau le plus décoré des armées françaises. Sur sa cravate sont fixées la fourragère aux couleurs de la Légion d'honneur, qui symbolise les 6 citations de la guerre 14-18, où plus de 7000 marins furent tués, blessés ou portés disparus. Il porte également la fourragère de l'Ordre de la Libération et la fourragère aux couleurs de la médaille militaire, qui symbolise les 5 citations de la guerre 39-45, obtenues après la bataille de Bir Hakeim, la campagne d'Italie, puis la campagne de France. Le 1er régiment de fusiliers marins est une unité des forces navales françaises libres. Il est l'une des 18 unités militaires françaises faites compagnons de la Libération. Le drapeau du 1er régiment de fusiliers marins est confié à l'école des fusiliers marins de Lorient, commandée par le capitaine de vaisseau Sébastien Well. Ce drapeau est présent tous les 6 juin, ici même, aux côtés des vétérans français du numéro 4 commando. Il représente la gloire et le sacrifice des milliers de marins qui ont servi dans des unités de fusiliers marins et sert d'emblème à tous les fusiliers marins et commandos marines engagés actuellement au service de la France.
Au drapeau! À mon commandement, reposez, armes, repos.
Presidents, kings, queens, we go live with you to rejoin around 20 world leaders and hundreds of veterans and other civilians at the post-lunch international commemoration ceremony marking the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings in Normandy. This is Ouistreham. Well, we're very close to Ouistreham. It's a small fishing village and ferry harbour at the mouth of the canal linking the city of Caen to the English Channel. Ouistreham, if you think it sounds like an oyster, it's true. The name is like saying oyster village, Ouistreham. It's been here since the Middle Ages.
And now soldiers of today salute the soldiers of yesterday. The veterans of the Normandy landings are now sat in their official seats after being escorted by a serving member of the American, French or British Armed Forces to their seats.
I must say I'm a bit concerned. Sorry, Robert. Yes, no, many of them have hats and some of them don't, and it's a very strong sun.
Yes, indeed.
But if they survived 70 years ago...
They should be able to survive today, yes.
In the inset there, we see the 5 main beaches from, let's see, south west to northeast. If you reoriented that map, and you see many of the important landing points. There we see Ouistreham flashing with the reddish-orange arrow pointing down, and the city of Caen just below it to the left. Each veteran is accompanied, or maybe accompanied, by 2 people at this international ceremony, and the stands are said to hold 3,000 people.
No, the stands are very impressive, I have to say. Well, everyone's now waiting, I suppose, for François Hollande and Barack Obama.
Here in Normandy, at the English Channel, we're about 270 kilometers west of Paris. We've been following commemoration ceremonies since earlier today, since this morning. 70 years ago, Allied gliders landed near this place we're seeing now. They landed men who seized the Key Bridge. That was to stop the Germans from using it to move armor around in a counterattack when the landings began at dawn of the 6th of June, 1944. Now, that was called Pegasus Bridge. Then it was called the Bridge of Bénouville. That's very close to where we are, at one end of it. So this crossing was christened Pegasus Bridge in honor of the British Airborne Forces, who took it without losing a man. They caught the Germans by surprise. British Airborne symbol was the flying horse Pegasus. As I said, there are leaders from around 20 countries here today. Australia, Canada, Germany, Italy, so symbols of reconciliation, presents marking reconciliation. Of course, there's Queen Elizabeth II. French President François Hollande has called her, or rather his office said she is a super guest of honor. But of course, the veterans are the focus here as the guests of honor. Hollande earlier lavished praise not only on the veterans, and this is a first, after all these years of focus on the efforts of soldiers, the soldiers of many nations. Look at those medals. Official respect has finally been lavished on the civilians of Normandy and the French resistance fighters among them. As bad as the military casualties among the Allies were, almost as many civilians died in the first day or so of the landings as soldiers. And in the whole of the Normandy region, some 20,000 civilians were killed. That's in crossfire between the Germans and the Allied forces. as the Allies pushed ashore, pushed inland, and certainly as victims of Allied bombing, British and American planes bombing strategic points so as to deny use of such transportation, communication to the enemy.
Yes, but this morning's ceremony honouring Caen and the people of Normandy was a very different affair to this international ceremony. It was bathed in sunshine, it was quiet, you could hear birdsong in the background. It was a very French affair.
Well, whereas this is bathed in sunshine.
Sure, but this
is a very French affair.
Cameras, this one.
It's splendid. It's a country with an immense military tradition, which sadly means that not only the people of the country, but even men-at-arms suffered so much and lost so much. Certainly no birds.
Well, none that we can hear.
I wonder how we managed no seagulls.
That's true.
Imagine 70 years ago this morning, with all the explosions.
Oh, the animals must have been terrified in 1944.
They wouldn't have been.
My goodness.
There was mention when President Obama spoke a few hours ago and drew attention to the landings which preceded the Normandy invasion. Enzio, Salerno, Sicily. One of the fine works written about World War II or about the Allied retaking of Europe was called "And No Birds Sang." Moving up through Italy, for example, one of the reasons, I mean, as we just mentioned, all the explosions and the fighting on the beaches 70 years ago this morning, all day and many days, you can understand you wouldn't have had anything flying around alive. But even without that, in Italy, the reason why there was no birdsong was they'd all been eaten. Hunger. And that's a theme that's been brought home to us with the Normandy commemorations. Local people, elderly today, remember as teenagers or younger saying how little they had to eat, that they were always hungry, that things were rationed, and that when the Allied soldiers came in, they gave them something to eat. President Hollande talked about solidarity. President Obama talked about gratitude. These are huge themes. Solidarity, well, sometimes there wasn't a lot to give out. One of the commentaries we heard was a veteran saying we would go from liberators, would be hailed from village to village, town to town, and people were so overjoyed to see them, but wine would be brought out, cider would be brought out. Maybe you said this earlier, that the cider was watered and the wine might be bitter. Never mind.
Yes,
there was so much goodwill.
Yes. And at every single village they arrived in, it was the same thing happened again.
Yes.
There's French Prime Minister Manuel Valls, French President François Hollande, arriving for the start of the international ceremony with children. As I told you earlier, all the world leaders have been greeted with children who will accompany them hand in hand to the seating area.
Présentez armes.
Let's watch and see protocol at work see who arrives where, when.
Well, it's the veterans are getting the honours today. Pride of place goes to them. After all, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here now.
As we can't hear enough to be able to transmit what's being said there.
If I try to stand, I fall over.
Maybe you heard that. In the meantime, let me share with you an excerpt from a statement signed by the Supreme Commander of the Invasion Force, Dwight D. Eisenhower, General Dwight D. Eisenhower, with Supreme Headquarters Allied Expeditionary Force on the letterhead, addressing soldiers, sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, saying, "You are about to embark upon the great crusade towards we have striven these many months. The eyes of the world are upon you." And that's true now. According to the French text of the program planned for the next roughly 1 hour, there is to be a theatrical presentation in 4 acts representing the phases leading up to, during and in the aftermath of the landings.
Yes, but before that we're supposed to get a speech from Hollande, yes?
Ah, yes. Not the first, not the last.
Oh, no. Right, the dramatic work that Adrian was telling you about, it'll be in 4 acts. The first is a preamble with occupied Europe. The second act talks about the fronts in the war. The third act talks about the conference in Tehran, the peace conference down there between Roosevelt, Churchill and Stalin. And finally, the final act is the Wall of the Atlantic. And who is this, if not the new president of Ukraine, the second world leader to arrive, Mr. Poroshenko, being escorted down the carpet.
It was very interesting to hear speeches earlier by Hollande and Obama, not mentioning Ukraine by name, nor Russia by name.
By name, no.
Although yesterday Hollande hosted Russian President Vladimir Putin for dinner at the Elysee Palace. Separately, on another occasion, he hosted President Barack Obama and his entourage at a fine restaurant in Paris. You mentioned, Robert, the Atlantic Wall as a feature in the last act of the presentation we're expecting to see. The Atlantic Wall was the entire defense setup by the German occupiers.
Yes, billions of cubic meters of concrete.
Traces of which remain today.
Oh, yes.
That Atlantic Wall, that so-called Atlantic Wall, defense complex after defense complex, was not even complete.
I think this is Tony Abbott now arriving, isn't it?
When the Allies came ashore 70 years ago today, some of the blockhouses and bunkers were still under construction, but there were hundreds that were, well, the buildings were ready and waiting, but there was an effect of surprise. We hear in remarks from Churchill that day and from American authorities saying they had expected the casualties to be worse.
Yes, that's true. Well, nobody told Mr. Abbott he was supposed to hold the children's hands as he came to meet the French president, but there he is, the Australian Prime Minister, now present and correct.
Funny you should point that out, holding the children's hands or not. There are so many nationalities represented here today, and there will be distinct cultural differences. Of course, it's very symbolic for a head of state or a prime minister to be greeted by children. This morning at the national ceremony, which Hollande led at the Caen Memorial, there was a huge participation by young people, down to children, singing with orchestral accompaniment.
Here's your man, Adrian, Mr. Harper.
Canada.
Right, we now have a minute's silence for Canada in honour of Adrian, who's sharing the live cabin here with me.
There are some Canadians who have become Europeans.
Indeed, Adrian. Oh, they're not holding the children's hands either. Come on, play the game, people.
And I'm half Dutch. Which reminds me, I suppose this means that once again, a few minutes ago I talked about protocol. See who arrives first, second, etc., last. Of course, the vast majority of people attending this have already taken their seats.
Well, I suppose they might be doing it alphabetically. Australia followed by Canada. Yeah. Who knows who's the enemy next?
Well, yes, but what about Belgium in between Australia and Canada?
Yes, indeed.
His Majesty the King of the Belgians, Philippe. So once again, we'll see whether anyone who's familiar with protocol will know that it's a matter of pecking order.
And here's Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor. Well, if we're going on the alphabet, Adrian, then this is perfectly coherent.
Unless you want to discount the Czech Republic, who will be or should be or represented by Miloš Zeman, the president.
Hang on, where's Angela gone? She didn't walk down the red carpet. She slipped off quickly. Oh, no, she's back on course.
Dressed darkly.
Now, you see, this is what happens when you don't hold the children's hands. The children know where they're going.
She's talking to one of them.
Oh, yes.
At least one of them.
Possibly asking him how his German lessons are going at school, of course. Don't forget, the French and the Germans decided this would never happen again in '45 and started cooperating
and look
the way two countries had never done before.
And look how well they followed through.
Indeed.
These decades of absence of war, certainly great improvements towards peace.
Yeah. On the shoulders of this pair, the Europe of the future is built. And there is the President of Europe, Herman Van Rompuy.
The President of the European Council. Outgoing. Soon to be replaced. That's all
Adrian's
under debate.
long years on the European Affairs desk are showing here.
How about the people, the desk? Note, Merkel arrives unaccompanied.
Yes,
and
true,
is
yes.
greeted by the French president unaccompanied. There are many dimensions to all this. Times change. Walking away like that? Ah, because there's another guest. Maybe they've picked up the piece on purpose. It's Van Rompuy, of course. They all know each other very well.
Oh, of course. It's just yet another meeting in the giddy whirl of international meetings.
It is not. It is not yet another meeting. It is. It's a massively important, historic get together. And as I said, it's without precedent at this morning's national ceremony. That the focus has been on civilians for much of the day. I can't see well enough, but is that a royal?
Oh, I can't see very well either.
Well, they've changed the music.
So it's a very nice lilac dress. Oh yes, we've gone on to sort of Glenn Miller-esque style thing going on in the background.
It is Philippe, King of the Belgians, and that's his official way of being
All
addressed.
right, well, there goes my alphabetic order theory then.
That's curious. I'm convinced that the louder applause is because of the significance of the country, Belgium, which so many countries had a very bad time during World War II. But certainly Belgium was one of the first to suffer that. And Elio Di Rupo there.
Yes, with his customary bow tie.
And once again, let's mention Belgium as one of the 6 founding countries of the European Economic Community. Here's the young king of the Netherlands, Willem-Alexander. Also, his country was a founder member of the European Economic Community, which became today's European Union. And it was his grandmother who was queen during the war, and she took her children to Canada for the duration, the safety of Ottawa, or just near it. Juliana, that was.
Yes, that's what's called making sure. Putting as much distance between you and the Germans as possible.
Well, her husband stayed behind in London.
Stop!
Now Miloš Zeman, the President of the Czech Republic, arrives.
Have you noticed, Robert, again the change of musical style?
Yes.
We went from military to Glenn Miller, swing, and now we go from, well, this sounds like Shenandoah, crossed with, name of,
oh, I don't, it does sound like a Western
Amazing
theme.
Grace, excuse me, Amazing
oh,
Grace.
yes, yes. Yes, it is Amazing Grace.
All of these are very strongly evocative of the time. And if it's like that for well, still today for younger generations. Imagine for the people who took part. I don't know if you mentioned earlier today a reference, I touched on some of the lyrics to the French national anthem, Aux armes, citoyens. I thought of that with the civilians. To arms, people, citizens.
Yes.
And also part of the lyric to the Marseillaise, raise the bloody banner, l'étendard sanglant élevé. And also the American national anthem, by the dawn's early light. Imagine coming ashore what the dawn's early light was like 70 years ago today.
On both sides, huh? Imagine those German soldiers peering out through the slits of their concrete bunkers that June morning and looking at these grey shapes appearing on the horizon. Is that it? Is the procession of world leaders finished now?
Doubtful. No, I'm saying because they've brought out sun umbrellas and parasols, especially for those who, as I said, might not have expected to be out in the blazing sun.
Oh, no.
While everyone else is well shaded.
Well, judging by the size of the car, I would say that is probably President Barack Obama arriving, wouldn't you?
Well, he's no longer in it, so we're looking at him arriving now. We've changed place. We're not on the beach.
No, I think this is Barack Obama leaving for lunch earlier.
And he doesn't rent cars; he brings them with him. So that might be one of his sort of rolling versions of Air Force One, also affectionately known as the Beast because it's so armor heavy. Speaking
now,
of,
there was an obvious link there. No, don't say it. Don't say it. President
heavy?
Vladimir Putin of Russia has arrived.
I'm sure his is armored as well.
Yes, yes.
A handshake. But no holds barred.
Something of a jaunty step to Mr. Putin today, don't you detect?
Yes. Again, solo.
Meeting up again with President Hollande, who managed to broker a meeting between him and Ukraine's new president earlier today.
Petro Poroshenko.
Possibly the most concrete and positive development of the whole day's celebrations. A little bit of real politics intruding on commemorative gesture.
Thank you, Francois. Don't mention it, Vladimir.
Well, there's somebody who will not be fearing anything from the... He's come well prepared for this bright sunshine. Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Jerry Matapare, the Governor General.
He's the Governor General,
yes.
Okay.
New Zealand, Australia, Canada, all these Commonwealth countries that came to support the so-called mother country the United Kingdom in its hour of need.
And if that hour of need ever came again, would they come again? Most probably would, I suppose.
Let's cross that Pegasus when we come to it.
Yes, indeed. The Governor-General sporting some fairly distinguished medals himself.
President of Italy, Giorgio Napolitano. I think we had a flash of the President of Poland there.
Yes, that was the Polish president beforehand, and here is, as you say, Napolitano, the veteran and President of Italy.
Poland's Bronisław Komorowski. Poles also came ashore under arms with the Allies on that morning. If not that morning, I'm maybe confusing with in the days that followed. Fierce fighting with as they beat the Germans back. Prince of Monaco?
It certainly is.
Name escapes me. Carlos Papoulias, the Greek president. Something Winston Churchill said of the Greeks as they fought to defend themselves against the German invasion. Churchill said something like, in the past we said the Greeks fought like heroes. Now we say the heroes fought like Greeks. High commendation of valor. He's got grandsons. Sorry, I think my mic was off. Slovakia's President Ivan Gasparovich. Slovakia, just as we had earlier, the Czech Republic, a country that did not exist in World War II because the Czech and Slovak republics were one country, Czechoslovakia. One of the early countries to be invaded. Not the earliest, because Poland got that first, September 1939. Yes, but as countries are sparking off the war, you're quite right. But that again is what it's worth. As the Élysée Palace mentioned, the special guest of honor. coming soon to a beach near you. Well, last is just to finish what I was saying, something about lost track of it.
Yes, so I think it's fairly clear now that we're getting two picture feeds, one from the beaches and one from the chateau where the world leaders are individually, one by one, slowly leaving to come here. Of course, François Hollande has been here for a while as the host. He had to be here to welcome everybody else, but everybody else, it seems, has been lingering over the port and biscuits and only now starting to arrive. We were told they were running about half an hour late, but now it is more like an hour late, everybody, so.
King of Norway here, Harald V. I was looking at his uniform. Apart from the splendid dress uniforms of the honor guard, the French honor guard, or it seems that almost all the uniforms are already in the seating areas.
Yes. Harold, one of the few world leaders to come in military uniform.
Did talk about protocol earlier. Royals last. Need confirmation there. Yes, it is Queen Margaret of Denmark. Another very popular one. And even though the king there, in his seemingly naval uniform, is one of the few to be dressed militarily, many heads of state are also officially the heads of the armed forces, including Queen Elizabeth. A uniform of a different sort.
Well, Elizabeth does have a uniform, of course. She's a colonel,
yeah, yes.
So she does have a colonel's uniform.
Yes.
She wears fairly rarely nowadays.
Some red in it. Call it British understatement. Speaking of colours, you will not have failed to notice the red, white and blue Poroshenko there.
Yep, Europe's newest leader.
Of Ukraine, for viewers who are still becoming familiar with that political groundbreaking advance, we hope. Together.
Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall arriving in Charles's Bentley.
Sure it's not hers, sorry?
Oh, Charlie likes Bentleys.
He wasn't driving. You don't know. Just coincidence. John Philip Sousa's Halls of Montezuma playing there. Sousa, the American.
Duchess of Cornwall having a good old chatter there to the girl accompanying her, showing off her common touch again. She's got a great rapport with people. Say what you like about the Duchess of Cornwall, she knows how to talk to people.
I'd like to think Charles does too.
I think Mr. Putin might have something to say about that, bearing in mind some of his more recent statements.
In Canada, no less.
Was it? Oh, yes.
He was on a visit to Canada.
Obviously feeling more relaxed than normal, visiting your fair country, Adrian.
Well, it wasn't supposed to be passed along, but he was speaking to, I believe, a Russian immigrant, Canadian, said something about Vladimir Putin.
Yes, indeed. Which we won't repeat.
I won't repeat it.
This might actually be the first time that Charles and Putin have met face-to-face since his comment. I wonder if a few words will be exchanged quietly.
Well, it certainly wasn't a compliment.
No.
But then again, it wasn't official.
Well, the reply from Putin certainly was.
Here's the proverbial hush fell over the crowd. I think we hear the drone. Yes, the drone of the bagpipes. Get ready, wait for it.
I'm just reading here that Queen Elizabeth II will officially be the last person to arrive. And she is apparently the only dignitary who has not been given an interpreter. She'll be listening to the events in real time in French.
Well, France and England do go way back. Close relations, and so on. It wouldn't be the first time. She is quite able in French.
Oh yes, as is Charles, of course.
Many, if not most, if not all of these military marches and other songs, but certainly the military marches, have alternative lyrics.
I'll bet they do.
Keep troop spirits up. Some of them can even be reproduced in front of mothers and aunts.
All right, well, if it's vans and escalades... Oh, might actually be the Italians arriving?
Well, that is an American flag.
Well, American and an Italian? Oh, an American and French flag. All right, okay, well, this should be President Obama then, I suppose.
I just noticed the Ukrainian flag at the end of the row of national flags behind that cavalcade, convoy, procession. Place of honor. It certainly stands out. That means Chevrolet. I guess they left the Lincoln. Goes fast. One or two of the lyrics to this tune, the alternative lyrics, to do with fine feathered friends.
I'm sure you must have a few alternative lyrics for this tune up in Canada.
No, I didn't learn that from any Canadian source. Dutch mother. Very very proper.
Oh, it sounds as though we've got the audience clapping along to the Star-Spangled Banner now. He's such a pop star, isn't he, Obama?
Oh, the Star-Spangled Banner as opposed to the Spangled Star, Obama.
Oh. Oh.
Well, no one was playing any music.
No, good shout, Adrian, good shout.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Very nice to see you, sir. Thank you for the service. Great honor to be with you.
American leaders, they always make us European leaders look so dowdy and grey and beige.
I beg to differ, or rather I would, but I'm not a European leader.
Wonderful to see you.
No, but you saw all the others arriving, and all the others arriving. Everybody politely sort of looked at them arriving. And Obama arrives, and everybody starts clapping along to the music. I mean,
Thank you, sir.
what can you do? We're all totally under their spell.
Thank you, sir. To shake hands, it's wonderful to see you. Good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for your service. Very nice.
Excuse me.
Very nice to see you. Thank you. What's happening?
Don't miss an opportunity.
And, you know, I have the feeling that our picture feed is the same picture feed that the crowd is getting on big screens around the place.
You could see that on the stage behind that giant globe stage that the soldiers are standing on.
Did you see then when we had those pictures of Putin standing, not looking especially relaxed or happy?
Just now?
Just now.
Certainly.
Did you hear a ripple of laughter in the background?
Yes.
When they saw his expression?
Mm-hmm. That is a split screen effect.
That is most definitely a split screen. I wonder why they've decided to do that right now.
Oh, and everybody is looking at that, yes. Let's remind viewers who might not be familiar with this, as great as the Allied contribution was to ridding the continent of Hitler's dictatorship, let us not leave out the the enormous contribution played by Russia, by the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, who waited for years fighting against Hitler's forces on the Eastern Front, saying to the Allies, when are you coming ashore? When are you going to push from the other side? Strains and death tolls and terrible, terrible difficulties for years. So we can't not mention how great the Russian role was.
No.
It's a long way to Tipperary.
A First World War song, of course, which was revived in the Second, as were so many.
My heart's right there.
In fact, that's a strange aspect of the Second World War, you know, Adrian. The First World War, a lot of songs came out of the First World War, but very few came out of the Second.
I disagree.
They were mostly songs of the First World War that were recycled and revived.
We were just talking about Glenn Miller, which isn't necessarily
Glenn
lyrics,
Miller is a
but
fairly
how about Vera Lynn?
exception.
Are you going to tell me you couldn't sing at least some parts of Vera Lynn songs?
I suppose I have to admit to, yes, there is Vera Lynn.
It's all flooding back, is it?
Yes. But they were home front. That was home front music.
The anniversary waltz, considering today is a great anniversary. Tell me I will always dance the anniversary waltz with you, love.
Okay, Adrian, I bow to your superior Second World War musical knowledge.
We can go to the first if you care. I wanted to mention that there were propaganda things in popular music as well, because one of the hits in Germany in World War II, Lili Marlene was
but that was a First World War song, wasn't it?
And used by the British as well, given British English lyrics and so on. Underneath the lamplight by the barricade, excuse me, Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, this song is Hang Out Your Washing on the Siegfried Line, which was a defensive line of the First World War.
Yes. I hadn't caught it yet. I was trying to remember, or rather get specific on the small number of years between the two world wars, and that today is this year is very big on war commemorations, considering it's been 100 years since the First World War began, the Guns of August.
Yes, we have all that to look forward to in August, of course. All the television channels around the world and the newspapers and the media will be raking over the 100th anniversary of the start of the First World War, and we'll be no exception to that.
That was the extended play version of It's a Long Way to Tipperary.
But you get a feeling today that everyone who is here has sort of got in the back of their mind the thought that this might not be repeated, because so many of the veterans are now in their late 80s or in their 90s.
The commemoration.
Yes.
Yes.
That perhaps there might be another big one possible for the 75th anniversary in 5 years' time, but perhaps 10 years' time down the line, there'll be very few people left who can remember what happened, who were actually there. It certainly explains the lavish...
Once again, yes, not letting this opportunity go past. But I was thinking of the opportunity, as we just saw Angela Merkel speaking with Vladimir Putin, not just, will this happen again, a commemoration of this size? We hope that nothing as earth-shattering as the conflict of World War II is ever repeated. Drummer's a bit behind. I grew up with jazz jokes, my Canadian father making jazz jokes like, how late does the drummer play? Oh, about half a beat behind the rest of the band. The Queen then...
Yes, I think she's the person we're all waiting for now.
I keep thinking this march is going to go into the theme from Bridge Over the River Kwai. Colonel Bogey's march.
Well, I suppose it's very possible we'll hear it today.
If we do, I won't get it out of my head for a week. Have you noticed? No synthesizers.
What I'm mostly noticing at the moment, Adrian, is no Queen Elizabeth.
John Kerry there. It reminds me of a quip attributed, I think, to Louis XIV. I was almost kept waiting.
There she is.
Spot the flag.
Elizabeth gets to drive up the red carpet.
Well, nobody else is bringing up the rear, so unless you count the armoured guard. Let's see if she's changed outfits or is still in green. Farewell Leicester Square.
Well, a stirring round of applause for Queen Elizabeth II here. It'll warm the hearts of our British audience watching.
Philip, looking well.
Still very much loved after all these years, Elizabeth.
I thought you were going to say Philip. Not to be outdone. Another good uniform. Let me remind viewers that we are here in Normandy at Ouistreham. It was the site of decisive action in the first minutes of the D-Day landings in Normandy 70 years ago, when a key bridge near this site was taken by Allied airborne forces, Pegasus Bridge. This is the formal international ceremony marking the landings. It follows a lunch by the VIP guests. Before that came the joint Franco-American ceremony at the American cemetery overlooking Omaha Beach, and before that, this morning, the French national commemoration, which placed focus on civilian deaths and the valor and resistance shown by non-military participants.
Well, it appears that the veterans have now been taken out of the sun and have been moved somewhere where they can have a better view of the show that's about to begin. The presentations have concluded, the world leaders have all arrived. The veterans are making their way to their reserved seats, and in a little while the international commemoration will begin. I don't know if you noticed, Adrian, but when Queen Elizabeth II sat down, her husband sat behind her, and she sat between François Hollande and the King of Norway. Philippe, as always, effacing himself gently into the background. And now the host, French President François Hollande, walks out onto the sands to begin the international commemoration of the 70th anniversary of the Normandy D-Day landings.
sortez. Armes. À droite. Droite.
Well, that has been the presentation of the Guards to French President François Hollande. Having now reviewed the troops, he'll make his way to the dais for his speech.
That was known as the Consular March.
Monsieur le Président de la République, les honneurs militaires vous ont été rendus par un détachement interarmé composé de la musique de l'artillerie, du drapeau du 1er régiment de fusiliers marins, ainsi que par une section des fusiliers marins commandos, une section du 1er régiment d'infanterie de la garde républicaine, une section du 1er régiment de chasseurs parachutistes et une section de la base aérienne 105. L'ensemble des troupes est placé sous les ordres du capitaine de vaisseau Sébastien Well, commandant l'école des fusiliers marins.
That was an enumeration of the full military honours due President Hollande by various sections of the French armed forces.
Yes, the Guards included a section from the normal infantry, from the Alpine brigades, from the commandos, and from the Army Air Reserve. The wind blowing up the sand a little bit from the beach.
Mesdames, Messieurs les
Ladies and gentlemen,
et de gouvernement,
heads of state, heads of government,
ici 19 pays.
you represent 19 countries.
Avec la France pour
19 countries who come together today with France in order to mark the reconciliation, the reunion, the coming together, the paying of homage, that we owe to all of these veterans who are present with us today and who I would first like to say welcome to. They are the living witnesses of what happened here on the 6th of June 1944.
Cette cérémonie du 70e anniversaire du débarquement.
This ceremony for the 70th anniversary of the D-Day landings is exceptional.
Par son ampleur, nous en avons la démonstration.
It's such a large celebration. We've seen this, but also for its popularity, for the enthusiasm it has generated. It's exceptional because of when it happens. This time when we're coming together. Our duty is to remember, we must remember, for all of the victims, whether military or civilian, Allied, but also here the German victims of Nazism.
Mais nous envoyons aussi un message par
But we're also sending a message with today's ceremony
un message de paix, une exigence
to all of the people who are taking part in this ceremony. It's a message of peace. For example, to encourage the United Nations to intervene where it needs to further collective peace. And it's a message for all of Europe. Europe that has made it possible for peace to come about. Although this was the continent of 2 world wars in the 20th century, 70 years ago to the day, on this spot, before this very beach, this beautiful beach, Riva Bella, so many Allied soldiers jumped into the water under fire from all directions in order to run towards the German defense system. They were around age 20, some of them younger. Who could say that 20 was the best age to be? For these young people, it was an age of duty. It went hand in hand with commitment and sacrifice. These young people were cold and afraid. The air on the 6th of June today seems very pure, yet then it was filled with the smoke of battle. It was broken with the sound of explosions. We see these beaches like this, but at the time they were scattered with the boats of the landing and stained red with the blood of those fighting. What were those young soldiers thinking of in the face of what they were experiencing? The cold. They were no doubt thinking of their mothers who they loved so dearly, their fathers who were worried about the women they loved far away, about their childhood, which was so close, and of their short lives, but also of blocked out horizons blocked out by war. And in the midst of this hell of fire and steel, they didn't hesitate. They moved forwards. They struggled forwards onto French soil, overcoming the bombardment, the bullets. They risked their lives in order to beat a diabolical evil. They moved forward to defend a noble cause, and they kept on moving forwards in order to free us at last. Among them were the members of the Kiefer Battalion, not many of them. 177 French soldiers. 177 valiant Frenchmen who made it possible for the country to be free. They were under the commandment of Mr. Philippe Kiefer, in British uniform. He formed the 4th Commando. 144 of them were to be hurt or killed in Normandy. A small group, but one of massive value. A little later, they became a much larger group. For the British Infantry Division under the orders of General Dempsey, who was in charge of taking the beach at Ouistreham. Further along the beach, there were Canadian troops. To the west, between Arromanches and Cotentin, there were the American forces under the command of General Omar Bradley. They paid a very, very high price in the course of this operation, in the course of this D-Day landing. That was on Omaha Beach, Bloody Omaha as it's called. General Bradley said, and I quote, "All those people who have set foot one day, that specific day on the 6th of June, all of them were heroes." It's true, all of those men were heroes. All of them who moved forward and who are still moving forward for our freedom.
Nous sommes en Normandie.
We're here today in Normandy.
Tout au long de l'été 1944 fut la plus grande bataille aéronavale de l'histoire.
The battle that took place throughout the summer of 1944 was the biggest air and sea battle that ever had taken place. The thousands of ships and planes, 140,000 soldiers, British, Canadian, American. On the 6th of June, 3,000 of them, on the one day alone, 3,000 of them were killed. But the soldiers who came from the sea succeeded in what they'd set out to achieve, to set foot on French soil and to stay there. On the 6th of June 1944, they began the liberation of France. And as the sun went down on this longest of days, there was a hope, a light at the end of the tunnel, and it began to shine on all of Europe from these beaches in Normandy. This brutal battle, we remember. The outcome was uncertain, yet it was so decisive. It was here that the soul of the fighters, it is here that the soul of the fighters is still present. It's on these tranquil beaches today, whatever time goes by, whatever the weather is, whatever the climate is, whatever season, there's a single wind that blows, the wind of freedom. This wind is still blowing today. This is why I'd like to say personally, in the name of France, on behalf of France, these beaches should become part of the UNESCO World Heritage.
Car ici, nous sommes sur un patrimoine mondial de l'humanité.
We are here at a site of global humanity. It's important to note that these sites are sacred and must be protected forever. We need to be able to welcome all of the generations who wish to visit these sites in the future, when they want to understand in detail and see exactly where humanity's future was decided on the 6th of June 1944. The veterans, the survivors, they're here today with us on the very spot they landed 70 years ago, the very places where their parachutes landed, where they fought, where they were injured. On France's behalf, I would in particular like to congratulate those who are present here today and send them my very best wishes. Thank you for being here. Thank you for having been here in the summer of 1944 and for still being here. On the 6th of June 2014, you will still be here in spirit forever. at the D-Day landing beaches.
Je veux exprimer ma gratitude à tous les combattants qui ne sont
I want to express my thanks, my gratitude to all of the soldiers who are no longer here.
Néo-Zélandais, Polonais,
Americans, British, Canadians, New Zealanders, Australians, Poles, Belgians, all the different nationalities who fought alongside
l'humanité.
with the Allied forces. All of them served humanity. And if today we're able to live in peace,
Vivre en sécurité,
if
si nous pouvons vivre
today we're able to live safely in our countries,
protégés par les lois que nous avons voulues,
if we can maintain our sovereignty and protect the laws that we've voted, it's thanks to these people who gave their lives.
la reconnaissance de la République française ne
I
s'éteindra.
want to say how much the French Republic is grateful. This will go on.
En venant ici, nous sommes tous, quel que soit notre âge, quel que soit
When
notre
we came here, all of us,
quel que soit nos
whatever our age, whatever our physical condition, whatever our origins, we were all gripped by a kind of emotion.
nous allons de lieu
What still strikes one,
et parfois
going from one place to another, sometimes when you
c'est le courage.
go from one cemetery to another, it's the courage of the soldiers who fought here,
Qui ont
the bravery of the
nuit pour préparer
parachutists
le courage des
who
rangers
jumped out into the night
pris la pointe du hoc,
to prepare the attack, the courage of the Rangers,
qui ont réduit
the
aussi
courage of the British soldiers who silenced
le général Norman Cotta,
the batteries of guns,
débarqué sur Omar
the silence of the leaders who
par la vigueur du feu allemand,
galvanized their troops on Omaha Beach, who
venu du monde
kept them there in spite of the German fire. All of these young people who came from around the world to
courage
retake foot by foot the dunes, the beaches, the courage of the French resistance fighters who facilitated the operation and made it possible.
rallié à l'appel du général de Gaulle,
The courage of Free France, the Free French,
civile
who heard General de Gaulle's appeal,
qui ont
the
souffert
courage
des
of
bombes
the civilian populations who suffered here in Normandy
considérables,
while bombs fell ceaselessly on their towns and villages.
joie, leur douleur d'avoir perdu un être cher, leur joie
And the people who didn't know whether to share their pain or joy,
conquis.
having lost those so close to them,
Je veux saluer
or to express their joy because they realized they were about to regain their freedom. I'd like to
face à
pay homage to the Red Army, which a long way from here,
capable
in the face of 150 German divisions, was capable of pushing them back and of beating them. And once again,
mais ça ne sera jamais trop. Je tiens à souligner
but
la
this
contribution
can never be said enough. I'd like to stress the decisive contribution made by the people of what we call the Soviet Union.
aussi dans le
These
devoir de
citizens,
reconnaître ce qu'ils ont fait
we must recognize, it's our duty, we must recognize what they did for our freedom, what they did for the victory, towards the victory against Nazism.
et enfin je veux saluer
Last but not least, I'd like to pay homage to the courage of the Germans, who were also victims of Nazism.
dans une guerre qui n'était pas la leur, qui n'aurait
They were drawn into a war that was not theirs, that should not have been theirs.
devant toute
And today,
victime du nazisme.
we would like to bow our heads before all the victims of Nazism.
Cette grande épopée, pour reprendre l'expression du
This epic period, to return to the expression used by General Eisenhower, reminds us of a very simple truth, a truth that we should always bear in mind under any circumstances. Freedom is a fight, a combat. Freedom's not something that's obvious or inevitable, as certain people might believe in some of our nations. People who believe that freedom is like the air we breathe, it's natural, and that you shouldn't even really think about it. And yet, freedom is always a fight. Freedom's never something that we can feel we've acquired forever. Men and women must always rise to defend their right to freedom, to win their right to freedom. 70 years after D-Day, this freedom is still under threat in so many places under too many regimes in the world. Here on the 6th of June, on the beaches of Normandy, 70 years ago, the democracies came together in order to strive together to defend a just cause. This just cause is still ours today. It's no longer the Allies who must rise, who must stand together to secure peace from those who threaten it. It's those who must the United Nations once again demonstrate that it is able to live up to the standards required of them? Yes, it's up to them to guarantee collective security around the world. I've talked about the courage of the fighters, the resistance, the courage of the population at the time. Courage in war, well, courage in peacetime is just as essential and just as necessary. The soldiers who landed here 70 years ago, what were they driven by? No doubt they were driven by patriotic duty, that goes without saying, but they were also driven by an idea they all shared, whatever their nationality. When they set foot on French soil, on these beaches, they carried a dream with them. It seemed inaccessible in 1944. A dream that was born out of the abyss, and a dream that gave light to their souls and consciousness. It was a promise of a world without war, delivered from tyranny. Also a dream for a fairer society, where people were capable of looking after one another, a dream that was formulated 2 years earlier by the two war chiefs who decided to prepare Operation Overlord, Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt, on a ship that dropped anchor in the middle of the ocean. That's where they wrote the Atlantic Charter. In that document, they reminded people of the reasons for the war: to defeat Nazism, to bring Europe back to peace. The Charter also specified that what they wanted to achieve among all nations was the fullest cooperation possible in terms of the economies, to guarantee for all that progress could be forthcoming. Social progress. On the 5th of May 1944, the Allies had adopted and ratified a declaration. That was the Philadelphia Declaration, which stipulated that all human beings have the right to pursue material progress, spiritual development, and their freedom and their dignity, as well as equal opportunity. This message, even today, obliges us still to strive for that, because the campaign that was carried out here took forward the flag of the cause, this ambition to end the terrible situations that have always tormented humanity: poverty, injustice, oppression. Everything that produces war. Ladies and gentlemen, together here today, yes, we still have a duty to work on, a duty to preserve the heritage that we've been given. We must bring together unity in Europe. Our duty is to reinforce the role of the United Nations. Our duty is to defend, wherever we can, human rights, and to defend dignity, the dignity of women who in too many countries of the world are subjected to brutality, are damaged. This is something that should affect all of us. It's also our duty to ensure peace in all countries. We, the heads of state and government, our role is also to serve peace. And where peace is threatened, it's our role to look for solutions and to seek outcomes so that a conflict does not degenerate into war. Our duty is to fight against fanaticism, extremism, nationalism. It's up to us, all of us, whatever our role in society, it's up to us to prove that we're capable of taking the same kind of vision, that we can be as daring and as conscious, as aware, as ambitious as all those people who landed on these beaches. Today, we're up against terrorism. It's one of the major scourges of our society. But there are also scourges, terrible scourges, that we've seen come out of humanitarian crises and the deregulation of financial systems. Let's look at climate changes, and there's also mass unemployment. None of this is comparable, but it also can threaten all of our nations. It can threaten cohesion, and it can sometimes lead to conflicts. On the 6th of June, the 6th of June isn't a day like any other, not just the longest day. The 6th of June is a day where the remembrance of those who died obliges the living, every moment of the day, to think about the future. We're here to represent the united peoples of the world. It's up to us to keep this promise that was written in the blood of the fighters. We must be loyal to their sacrifice. We must develop in their name and in the name of future generations a fairer world, a more humane world. I bow down before the people who died on the beaches of Normandy. I salute the veterans. I say to the heads of state and government, thank you for being here today. I want to say what lies ahead of us is more than duty, it's an obligation for the world. We have a duty because of those people who fought for freedom on these beaches, and for these people who know in their spirit, in their souls, that we are their inheritors. We are their heirs. Thank you.
Well, that was quite a speech from the French president, drawing a line under history and taking that line forward into the future. I cannot resist telling you this one little snippet of breaking news. Apparently, a nursing home in Sussex in southern England reported that they had lost one of their elderly gentlemen staying with them, an 89-year-old war veteran. So the nursing home in Sussex sent out an appeal that the man had gone missing and asked the police to try and find him. Well, he has been found. He's here with his mates. They managed to smuggle him out of the nursing home because he was told he wouldn't be able to go to the celebration today because of his advanced age and health, and his mates smuggled him out. So if you're running a nursing home in Sussex looking for one of your war veterans, don't worry, he's here, having a good time with his friends. That must have been some operation, getting him out of that nursing home. And now we're about to enter the wonderful world of French dramatic reconstructions, or something like that, a four-act dramatic representation of, well, of 1940 to 44, as far as I can understand it. And the first act is entitled Life Under the Occupation. Oh, this is France. There's going to be some dancing involved, Adrian.
I was just saying it was a large stage.
Mm-hmm.
And since this is France, there'll be pyrotechnics.
Well, I'm guessing that the people
more.
in grey are the occupied and the people in black are the occupiers. That's what I'm guessing.
Well, I'd say it's pretty daring to mount a theatrical performance in broad daylight without the reinforcement of spectacular lights French technology can bring to the stage. We saw some familiar gestures there from that lone performer.
L'Europe est sous la botte. Après 4 ans de guerre, de l'Atlantique à la Volga,
Europe is
de
suffering.
la Norvège au littoral méditerranéen,
After 4 years of war, from the Atlantic to the Volga, from all corners,
dans plusieurs pays,
everybody is
les
suffering
collaborationnistes se mettent au service de l'ordre noir.
under the Nazi cross. There are those who collaborate and those who serve the Black Order. Italy, Yugoslavia. Poland.
Mais des femmes et des hommes, courageux jusqu'au sacrifice du matin,
But men and women,
combattent l'oppression
brave from morning until night,
en Europe, en
resisted
Belgique, aux Pays-Bas,
in Europe,
en
in
Tchécoslovaquie,
Belgium, in
au
Czechoslovakia,
Danemark, en Norvège, En
in
Allemagne,
the Netherlands, in
la
Germany,
résistance politique et armée se développe.
armed political resistance began to
En
develop.
Italie, en Grèce,
In
en
Italy, in
France,
Greece, in France,
des maquis regroupent ceux qui préfèrent mourir que ceux.
Maquisards joined together to resist the German occupation. Greece. Italy. And one by one, as night fell across Europe in 1939 and 1940, like dominoes, the democracies collapsed. And the black tide rose and covered everything decent and human.
Les armées alliées sont partout à l'offensive.
Allied armies moved into
Depuis
the
la
offensive.
capitulation allemande à Stalingrad en février 1943,
In
l'armée rouge
43,
cesse d'avancer.
the Wehrmacht
Remporte la
is stopped
bataille de
at
Charles
Stalingrad.
en juillet 1943.
In
La
43, the
majorité
tank
des
battle in
Allemands
Kursk
dans la
ends Germany's ambitions in the east.
Les soldats américains soutenus par les
Pacific,
Australiens et les Néo-Zélandais
The Americans,
se
supported by the Australians and New
contre les
Zealanders,
Japonais dans une
fight
guerre
against the
affreuse,
Japanese
cruelle.
in a cruel
Après
war.
Midway en juin 1942,
After Midway in
en février
1943,
1943, les forces alliées libèrent les Philippines en 1943.
Allied forces liberate the Philippines.
Après l'Afrique du Nord, les Alliés
Then,
partent en
after
Sicile
North
en juillet
Africa,
1943
In
et
43,
entreprennent
the Allies land in Sicily and make their way up Italy. Slowly, the black tide retreated.
Téhéran, en novembre 1943, Roosevelt, Churchill
In Tehran, Roosevelt, Churchill and Stalin
au front en Europe occidentale. Ce sera l'opération Overlord.
meet to decide on the date of the invasion of France. Operation Overlord is agreed on.
Méditerranéen. Staline s'engage à lancer au moment du débarquement une grande offensive de l'armée rouge.
Stalin agrees to launch a big Red Army offensive to coincide with the Normandy landings.
L'enjeu est crucial. Hitler est convaincu que
It's a major challenge. Hitler is convinced that the final battle will take place in the west. The coastline's been filled with concrete to create the Atlantic Wall.
frontière espagnole. En France,
Fortifications from Norway to the Spanish border. In France, for example, 59 German divisions, 7,000 people are there waiting, awaiting the inevitable Allied landing.
Les préparatifs du débarquement ont demandé
The preparations
colossale.
for the
Il a
landings
fallu acheminer en grande
required a massive amount of logistics. It was
des millions d'hommes. Il faut concevoir
tons of equipment was needed in the UK, millions of people, artificial bridges, pipelines. Every day after D-Day, the Allied forces planned to bring in 2,500 vehicles, 12,500 tons of equipment.
La stratégie alliée consiste à faire croire aux Allemands que le
The Allied strategy consisted of making the Germans believe that the landing would take place
prend le nom d'opération.
in another region.
Une vraie fausse
This was called Operation Fortitude. A false army was created, managed by General Patton, created from A to Z with plastic planes and polystyrene planes.
La résistance française joue un rôle important.
French resistance movement played a very important role for the D-Day landings. The French forces from the inside of the country included roughly 5 million men and women in 1944. The resistance movement provided so much information on the Atlantic Wall, airports, barracks, where munitions were hidden, where guns were located. The Allies knew exactly what there was along the Atlantic Wall. On the 6th of June, the resistance were told, get going, go into action. They were told, it's hot in Suez, the arrow will not reach its target. They were told, it's not a joke, codes. And so the resistance began to wreck the railroads, and the electrical lines, and bridges. This helped to isolate the theatre of operations. Reinforcements would be delayed.
Dans la nuit du 5 au 6 juin, 900 avions
During the night of the 5th and the 6th of June, 900 aircraft
américaines.
took off from Britain.
Dans le même temps,
At the same time,
6e division aéroportée britannique
6th
protège le flanc est.
Airborne Division
Des planeurs déposent des
landed British soldiers behind enemy lines.
non sans casse. À l'aube, une gigantesque armada de 1200 vaisseaux de guerre et de 5000 navires de transport
At dawn, a gigantic armada of transport ships
vers leur destin.
brought over 50,000 soldiers towards the coastline. They were heading towards their destiny.
Après un bombardement intensif, les opérations de débarquement débutent.
After intensive bombing, the D-Day operations began on the 5 beaches that had been chosen.
À Omaha Beach, les 1ère et 29e divisions d'infanterie américaines subissent des pertes terribles.
On Omaha Beach, the 1st 29th Division of the Americans was subject to terrible losses. In the first wave of the assault, they were obliged to lay down on the floor, dead or mortally injured.
Vers midi, après 6 heures de combat, la plage est prise.
Towards midday, after nearly 6 hours of fighting, the battle was won on the beach.
Ou disparu.
Roughly 2,500 men had either died, were injured, or had disappeared.
À Utah Beach, en revanche, les hommes de la 4e division
At Utah Beach, however, the men of the 4th Division, the infantry division, were able to take over the beach in less than an hour. At Gold and Juno Beaches, the 50th and the 3rd Divisions, one British, the other Canadian, after harsh fighting, were able to make headway towards inland.
À Sword Beach, sur cette plage, les troupes
At Sword Beach, on this beach here,
britanniques contrôlent les lieux rapidement.
troops from Britain's 3rd Infantry Division were able to take control quickly.
Un sonneur de cornemuse ne cesse de jouer pendant l'assaut.
The different sorts of tank
Les fusiliers
were able to play their roles, and the bagpipes played ceaselessly throughout.
s'emparent du casino de Rivabella, transformé en bunker fortifié.
They suffered a great deal of losses, but they were able to take over a casino and take over a stronghold that was to prove extremely useful in the days that followed.
Au soir du 6 juin, 132 000
On the evening of the 6th of June, 132,000 men and roughly 20,000 vehicles had landed. The operation called Overlord was a success. A strip of land, only several kilometers long, made it possible to deepen and enhance the arrival of the Allies. In the morning, General Eisenhower announced to the world that the landing had taken place.
Coast of France by troops of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
En début de soirée, le général de Gaulle parle à la...
At the beginning of the evening, General de Gaulle spoke on the radio from London. The supreme battle is underway. The battle for France is the battle of France, he said.
La bataille de Normandie est terrible. Elle dure.
The Battle of Normandy is a dreadful battle.
C'est une véritable guerre de position.
It lasts for 90 days.
Retranchés dans le bocage,
It's really a war of positioning.
se battent avec acharnement.
In the swamps, the elite German troops fight hard.
Bloqués par l'offensive de l'armée rouge, promise par
They
Staline.
do not receive the support they require, as Stalin had promised to lead an onslaught to draw German forces there. That prevented reinforcements from being sent to the coasts of France.
Jusqu'au 9 juillet, les forces
Until the 9th of July, the Allied forces move around Caen, the martyred city that has been turned to rubble.
bombardements alliés sur les villes normandes, comme
The Allied bombings on the cities and towns of Normandy
font 14 000 victimes civiles.
take 14,000 civilian victims.
Après la percée d'Avranches le 30 juillet, la bataille de Falaise, où s'illustre la première division blindée polonaise,
After the 30th of July advances, Polish jeeps arrive, enabling the Allied forces to move towards the gates of Paris.
Appuyée par la 4e division américaine,
Assisted by the 4th American 4th Division,
capitale française insurgée.
General Clerk's 2nd Division was
Une forme de sacre populaire.
able to relieve others. De Gaulle was celebrated,
95 000 hommes participent au débarquement de Provence.
hailed as a hero in Paris.
Environ
15,000 men took part in a landing in Provence.
Commandé par le général
More fighters followed.
provenant dans leur
Among the soldiers under General de Tacquinay, most of them from North America and Europe.
Le débarquement décisif accélère la retraite allemande.
The decisive landing accelerated.
Et dans les Alpes, la
The decisive landing accelerated the German withdrawal.
Dans le sud-ouest, le Massif
The
central,
Allies were then able to make
à la libération de la
swift headway.
qui est presque achevée à la fin de l'année 1944.
The resistance in the mountains also enabled
Les bombardements
moves to push the Germans back.
en particulier Cologne, Hambourg, Dresde, en amas de décombres.
Cologne, Hamburg, Dresden were bombed
Puis sur les routes.
to rubble. Hundreds of thousands of German
Mars
civilians
1945, les forces
sought refuge.
franchissent le Rhin. Le 25 avril,
In March 1945, Allied forces crossed the Rhine.
avec l'armée rouge.
On the 25th of April, the American army met up with the Red Army, the Russians.
Le 25 avril
The
1945,
25th of April 1945, the battle for Berlin began.
après plusieurs jours d'intenses combats,
After several days of intense fighting, the Soviet flag was raised above the Reichstag. On the 1st of May, Germany gave in.
à Berlin.
The documents were signed on the 8th of May in Berlin. The 5th of May, elsewhere.
Le 8 mai, partout,
On the 8th of May,
La paix retrouvée. À Londres,
people everywhere, people celebrated.
à New York, à Moscou.
The return of freedom in London, Paris, New York, Moscow.
Trois mois plus tard,
3 months later,
d'Hiroshima et de
the
Nagasaki
atomic bombs
précipite la
were dropped
capitulation du Japon.
on Hiroshima and Nagasaki,
La guerre est finie.
forcing Japan to surrender. The war was over.
La guerre a provoqué la mort d'au moins 50 millions de personnes. Les populations
50
civiles
million
ont été
people
affreusement
were
touchées.
killed.
L'ouverture des camps de la mort révèle aux yeux du monde
The opening of the death camps
le général Eisenhower
is
découvrant les
revealed
cadavres
to
du
the whole
Camp de
world,
dépendance du camp de concentration
showing
de
up the
Buchenwald,
face of hell.
déclare « Certains se demandaient pourquoi nous combattions. Maintenant, ils sauront contre quoi nous nous battions. »
Some people wondered why we were fighting, now they will know. Quote from a leading general.
Now that's rather a nice touch, isn't it? The cameras turning back onto the audience, watching a celebration of their own lives.
Notably the veterans.
Yes, the veterans are the stars here, without a question. And I'm guessing that takes us to the end of the dramatic reconstruction, doesn't it?
Very close.
I think this is the final set piece, yes, a funereal march with a tolling bell, I believe, if I understood this correctly.
Aux morts.
To the dead.
And now the crowd is whispering, "Not that, ever again."
I believe it's the mass troop on stage.
Yes.
Plus jamais ça. Avant même la fin de la guerre, les délégués de 50 nations se réunissent à San Francisco pour jeter les bases de l'Organisation des Nations Unies qui peut prévenir et régler les conflits qui surgissent. Tâche difficile, incertaine, inaboutie. L'idée européenne est née du refus de la guerre. En 1948, se tient à La Haye un grand congrès pour l'Europe. C'est le début d'une longue et difficile marche des pays européens pour se rassembler dans une communauté de destin. Sous l'impulsion de Robert Schuman et des autres pères fondateurs, commence à se construire l'Europe fondée sur les valeurs de la démocratie.
But slowly Europe was developed under the heading democracy.
Elle se fera par des réalisations concrètes.
Europe is an act of faith. It must bring the countries together. It must be based on solidarity between the different nations.
Depuis le traité de Rome en 1957, l'Europe a et politique. Elle est aujourd'hui facteur de paix et de progrès pour les 28 pays qu'elle unit.
Political and economic unity. Today, 28 countries comprise the European Union.
And stars have replaced the man in black on the map drawn in the sand.
Stars.
Well, Europe's had a dark future, and the whole point of the European Union is to bury that future and to ensure that, bury that past and ensure that the future is not as dark as it. In many ways, the events that took place on these beaches here 70 years ago laid the template and the foundations for the modern Europe we live in today. It was a war against totalitarianism, a war in support of democracy, and we see the fruits here 70 years on of democracy triumphant in Europe.
Soixante-dix ans après, les ennemis d'hier se retrouvent.
70 years later, yesterday's enemies have come together hand in hand to show fraternity. On the left-hand side, Léon Gauthier, member of commandos of the Free French, and on the right, Johannes Bonner, who was a lieutenant in the German army.
L'image de Léon Gauthier et Johannes Bonner, ce geste de paix est un geste d'avenir. Et il nous invite à le faire.
This gesture of reaching out for peace is a way of reaching out towards the future. We in our turn should do the same. So the spirit of freedom
une journée qui a marqué pour toujours
that was sown on this beach survives forever. So that we know June 6, 1944 was a date to mark the history of humanity.
And so the new generation lines up with the old to the strains of Bach. To Beethoven, I beg your pardon. If things had been different, we might all have been listening to Wagner today, but Beethoven won the day.
Ode to Joy. The official European hymn.
And here we have the blue, white and red of a French flypast, ladies and gentlemen.
In fairness, it's not only the French flag that bears the red, white and blue.
No, but look at the order of the smoke, Adrian. Give the French their moment. And you were right, pyrotechnics. Has to be pyrotechnics. And there you have it. The Atlantic Wall replaced by a wall of flags, 28 flags of 28 member states. And some foreign friends included. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that at home. Quite a stirring and moving, dramatic recreation through dance of the Second World War. Former President Vladimir Giscard d'Estaing there talking to François Hollande.
Look who's next to him.
Oh, yes.
Former President Nicolas Sarkozy.
Former Prime Minister Edith Cresson. Of course, Jean-Marc Ayrault, Hollande's first Prime Minister there.
Laurent Fabius, Prime Minister.
I imagine that is the mayor of the local town as he's wearing his sash. And these presumably will be local dignitaries of some kind.
just put in a word, as we saw a man of the church there. Of course, and also since earlier I gave an excerpt from the address from General Eisenhower saying this is a crusade. Let's bear in mind that not everyone under arms in the French forces or others were Christian, but also Muslims, notably from North Africa, who helped liberate Europe at great cost.
So as you can see, President Hollande is making his way around the crowd, saying his hellos and goodbyes. Veterans are hugging for one last time. And the international ceremony commemorating the 70th anniversary of the invasion of France and D-Day appears to be winding down to a close. Now, we, of course, will be revisiting all the events of the day during our regular news broadcasts later on, when we'll be giving you an overview and a summing up of what happened. Notably, it saw some political meetings going on the fringes between Presidents Obama, Putin and Poroshenko, but now we're going back to our regular news broadcasts.
Back. Thank you. It was a wonderful ceremony. It was wonderful. So we will give us
Oui, je sais. On cherche pour une date.